Basically, we'll have two big triangles, a matched pair. And so your boat would suspend right here from a cross member.
Just 1 minute ago, authorities in the Blue Ridge Mountains made a discovery that's leaving everyone speechless. Beneath the land once owned by survivalist legend Eustace Conway, a vast underground tunnel system has finally been found, one that few believed even existed. At first, they thought it was just another cave system, but this was something entirely man-made. Reinforced beams, carefully carved walls, and hidden entrances all pointed to years of deliberate work. What they didn't expect was where it led. Locals have long spoken about Eustace's strange disappearances into the forest, the long hours he spent digging, and his cryptic words about the earth holding the secrets of freedom. Now, it seems those words weren't just philosophy, they were blueprints. The tunnels snake beneath Turtle Island Preserve, a private wilderness Eustace spent his life protecting. But when searchers followed one passage to its end, they uncovered something that changes everything about who he was and what he might have been hiding. Before we reveal what lies below, make sure to subscribe and stay with us, because what's waiting in those tunnels might rewrite everything we thought we knew about Eustace Conway. It all began with what seemed like an ordinary problem. Heavy rains had swept across the Blue Ridge, and caretakers at Turtle Island Preserve noticed unusual depressions forming near the edge of the property. One morning, a young volunteer named Caleb stumbled upon a sinkhole that looked oddly uniform, too perfectly shaped to be natural. As he cleared the mud, his shovel struck something hard and metallic. After hours of digging, he revealed what looked like an old iron hatch, almost fossilized by time, its hinges buried under decades of clay and roots. No one could explain why it was there. Some thought it might have been a storm shelter from the Civil War era, but Eustace's personal markings on the latch told another story. When they finally pried it open, a deep, musty gust of air rushed out, cold, ancient, and heavy with the scent of earth that hadn't breathed in years. Beneath the hatch, a wooden ladder descended into darkness. The rungs were worn smooth by use, but remarkably intact, as though someone had been maintaining them not too long ago. Holding flashlights, the team climbed down one by one. At the bottom, they found themselves in a narrow tunnel that stretched farther than their lights could reach. The walls were reinforced with precisely cut logs, each notched together in a style instantly recognizable to anyone familiar with Eustace's craftsmanship. As they ventured deeper, strange details emerged. Symbols carved into the beams, jars filled with herbs and animal bones neatly stacked on shelves, and old lanterns coated in dust. Someone had lived or worked down here for a long time. The tunnel wasn't random. It had structure, direction, and purpose. Following the winding passage, they reached a larger chamber, where remnants of tools lay scattered: pickaxes, spades, and what appeared to be a handmade pulley system used to haul debris. Every inch of it screamed Eustace's name. It was meticulous, practical, and yet deeply spiritual. Locals recalled how he used to disappear for hours, sometimes whole days, heading into the woods with supplies and returning coated in mud. He'd smile, but never explain where he'd been. Many thought he was simply meditating in solitude, as he often preached about finding truth beneath the surface. But now, the literal meaning of that phrase echoed chillingly in everyone's mind. The deeper they went, the clearer it became. This wasn't a simple hideaway. It was a network. Each tunnel branched off in multiple directions, some caved in, others too tight to enter. The team realized they were only scratching the surface of something much bigger, something that Eustace may have spent decades creating in secret. The purpose of this underground system remained unclear, but one thing was certain: it wasn't meant to be found. When they emerged from the tunnel hours later, covered in dirt and shaken by what they'd seen, one caretaker whispered, he wasn't just surviving out here, he was preparing for something. When the exploration team returned to the site, they brought better lighting and gear, determined to map the entire system. As they descended through the hatch again, the smell of wet earth grew heavier, and the air turned colder. The deeper they went, the more they realized this wasn't just a tunnel. It was an entire subterranean world. The first chamber stretched nearly 20 feet across, its walls carefully reinforced with stone and timber. On one side sat a crude workbench littered with chisels, leather gloves, and rusted tins. Above it, candle soot painted black streaks on the ceiling, suggesting Eustace had spent long nights working down here. They followed a narrow corridor branching to the left and discovered what looked like a storage room. Dozens of glass jars lined the shelves, each sealed with wax and labeled in Eustace's handwriting. Roots, herbs, powders, and dried leaves. Some of the jars were filled with preserved meat and animal fat, the kind of supplies meant to last through months of isolation. Whoever built this place wasn't preparing for a single night underground. This was a survival system designed to sustain life. As they continued, the tunnel began to twist sharply, leading to a slope that dropped into a lower level. There, they found the remains of an old handcart and a pulley system fixed into the ceiling, an ingenious setup for hauling soil and rocks to the surface. Eustace's engineering skill was on full display. Each beam was measured, each support strategically placed. It was both art and survival science combined. Yet, what made the team uneasy were the markings on the walls. Symbols, hand-carved, repetitive, almost ritualistic, ran along the tunnel edges. Some resembled mountains, others spirals, and one particular symbol appeared again and again, an eye surrounded by roots. Experts later traced that design to ancient Appalachian folklore, representing the Watcher beneath the ground, a guardian of the natural world. Whether Eustace used it as protection or symbolism remains unknown. After several turns, they reached what appeared to be the heart of the labyrinth, a vast chamber that stretched beyond the beam of their lights. In its center lay a large stone slab surrounded by melted candles, bundles of sage, and pieces of animal bone carefully arranged in geometric patterns. The air was still, silent, heavy with meaning. This wasn't just a workspace, it was a shrine. The walls were covered with charcoal drawings of mountains, trees, rivers, and human figures intertwined with roots. It felt spiritual, almost sacred. Some say Eustace believed these tunnels connected him directly to the spirit of the mountain, that each chamber represented a stage of harmony between man and earth. But before they could explore further, one of the team members spotted something unusual on the far side of the chamber, a sealed wooden door reinforced with iron bars, hidden behind a layer of mud and moss. And carved into the wood were the words, "The deeper you go, the more truth you find." No one knew what waited beyond that door, but the moment they opened it, the mystery of Eustace's tunnels took an even darker turn. The team stood frozen before the wooden door, its iron hinges eaten away by rust, but still solid enough to hold back whatever was behind it. The message carved into the surface, "The deeper you go, the more truth you find," sent chills through everyone. Using crowbars, they pried it open, the sound of cracking timber echoing through the underground corridors like a scream. A blast of air rushed out, thick and stale, as if it hadn't moved in decades. When their flashlights pierced the darkness, what they saw didn't match the rustic craftsmanship of the earlier tunnels. The walls here were made of concrete. The beams were replaced by steel. It was colder, sharper, and mechanical. Nothing like Eustace's organic handiwork. The floor was lined with remnants of wiring, corroded pipes, and fragments of metal that looked military in origin. It was as if someone else had continued his work, turning his humble refuge into something much more complex. In the center of the room stood a large ventilation shaft leading straight up. No one knew where it ended. One of the men shone his light upward, but the beam disappeared into endless blackness. This section had power lines, old insulated cables that seemed to run toward the far wall, where an ancient control box sat. When they opened it, they found fragments of radio parts, coils, and antenna wires. Whoever had modified this chamber had knowledge of communication systems, something Eustace was never publicly known for. Could it be that someone else used this place after him? Or was Eustace communicating with off-grid contacts we never knew existed? Among the scattered debris, one explorer picked up a rusted tin containing rolled parchment, sealed in wax. Inside were sketches of radio towers, coded frequency numbers, and notations written in Eustace's handwriting. The words "Sky Net of Freedom" appeared several times, along with references to electromagnetic lines of communication. Historians later found that Eustace once mentioned wanting to live beyond the reach of all signals. Maybe he wasn't hiding from modern society. Maybe he was building a way to live beyond it. As they explored further into the steel-lined room, another clue appeared: a crate containing gas masks, old flashlights, and emergency supplies wrapped in oilcloth. These weren't primitive items, they were military-grade, and stamped faintly on the side of one crate were the letters U.S. Depth of Interior, 1964. It made no sense. This was long before Eustace even purchased Turtle Island Preserve. Could someone else have begun this network before him, and Eustace merely expanded it? The timeline was collapsing into confusion. Whatever the explanation, one thing was clear. This chamber wasn't just a shelter. It was a command post. The strange mixture of survival tools, communication equipment, and ritual markings made the team realize they were standing in something far more elaborate than a hideout. When one explorer brushed away the dirt from a side panel, he noticed something else: a faint outline of another doorway, this time sealed completely with concrete. Eustace had walled it off intentionally. What was so important that he'd go to such lengths to hide it? As they debated whether to break through, one of them whispered, "What if we're not supposed to see what's behind there?" But curiosity won. They began chipping away at the wall, unaware that what lay beyond would finally explain why Eustace built the tunnels, and what he was really protecting. After hours of careful work, the team broke through the concrete wall. The air that escaped was dry and strangely warm, as if it had been sealed for half a century. Beyond it, they found another corridor, this one narrower and sloping downward at a steep angle. Unlike the earlier sections, this tunnel seemed freshly cut. The soil was loose, the supports newer, and faint markings on the walls suggested Eustace had continued digging late into his life. As they followed the path, the sound of dripping water echoed in the distance. It felt less like a man-made tunnel now, and more like a living organism, breathing and creaking around them. Several hundred feet in, the narrow passage opened into a chamber where the earth gave way to rock. A faint draft hinted at an exit somewhere nearby. Then, one explorer's flashlight caught something unusual: wood planks covering what appeared to be a large circular opening in the ground. When they removed them, they discovered a narrow shaft leading diagonally upward. The tunnel, it turned out, extended far beyond the property line. carving its way toward the Watauga River. They followed it for nearly half a mile until it ended at an iron hatch cleverly disguised beneath a massive fallen log near the water's edge. When they lifted it, morning light streamed through for the first time in decades. This wasn't a random escape tunnel. It was precision work, angled perfectly toward the river, with a concealed outlet that could only be seen from one direction. Locals later confirmed that Eustace often camped near this very stretch of river, calling it his freedom line. It now seemed clear that the tunnel was designed as an exit route, a way to disappear into nature instantly. But why would Eustace, who always preached about transparency, simplicity, and living openly with the land, need an escape route? Those who knew him best say he grew increasingly distrustful of outside interference after repeated clashes with government officials over land regulations. He once said, "They want to own the air I breathe." The tunnel system, then, might have been his ultimate act of defiance, a physical embodiment of independence, built to ensure he could live by his own rules no matter what. Yet the deeper meaning ran even stronger. The final chamber before the river was unlike the rest. Inside were strange arrangements of stones forming circular patterns on the floor. At the center sat an old wooden chest, wrapped in animal hide and bound with rope. When they opened it, they found handwritten letters and a small journal. One entry read, "Freedom cannot exist above ground anymore. The world's roots are safer than its sky." Another page contained what looked like coordinates, numbers etched deeply into the page. When plotted, they pointed to a remote section of the Appalachian foothills, miles from Turtle Island. Could there be more tunnels there, part of a much larger network? Or was it a symbolic message, pointing toward something Eustace wanted to remain undiscovered? For now, no one could tell. But as the team sealed the hatch behind them, they couldn't shake the feeling that the tunnels weren't just Eustace's hiding place. They were his message to the world. Freedom isn't something you live above the ground. It's something you build beneath it. Days later, determined to uncover the full truth, the exploration team returned with stronger equipment and descended once more into Eustace Conway's secret underground world. This time, they focused on the smaller passageways branching off from the main chambers. One of these side tunnels led them into an area they hadn't explored before, a narrow crawl space that opened into what they would soon call the Forbidden Room. The entrance was partially collapsed, sealed off by thick layers of rock and timber, almost as if Eustace himself had tried to bury it. After hours of digging through the rubble, they finally cleared a path wide enough to squeeze through. What they found inside made everyone fall silent. The air was dense, still and cold, carrying the faint scent of smoke and aged wood. Against the far wall stood a wooden table covered in wax-sealed jars, leather-bound books, and folded maps drawn by hand. Dozens of candles, long melted into the dirt floor, surrounded a stone pedestal in the center of the room. On that pedestal rested an old animal skull carved with intricate markings. It wasn't random. The pattern matched ancient Appalachian spiritual symbols, many linked to Cherokee burial traditions. What was a survivalist like Eustace doing with ritual carvings and ceremonial objects hidden underground? Some theorized that this was where Eustace performed his spiritual studies, blending native traditions with his own philosophy about man's connection to the earth. On one wall hung a framed photograph, badly faded, showing a young Eustace standing beside his father near what looked like a strange rock formation. Locals who later analyzed the photo realized the formation could only be seen from inside a specific section of the tunnels, suggesting that Eustace may have recreated a sacred site from his childhood. As the team examined the books, they discovered pages filled with personal reflections. entries that blurred the line between survivalism and mysticism. He wrote of hearing the heartbeat of the earth, of following whispers in the soil that led him to the resting place of old wisdom. It was clear this room wasn't about storage or escape. It was about preservation. Artifacts lined the walls. Arrowheads, broken pottery, animal pelts, even handmade tools that looked older than anything Eustace could have crafted alone. Some items were tagged with labels like Echoes of the Ancients and Return to Light. It was as if he was building a museum beneath the mountain, protecting relics that didn't belong to any one generation. But one discovery changed the tone of the entire dig. Hidden in a wooden chest beneath the pedestal was a letter sealed in wax, addressed simply to the next listener. The letter's message was brief but haunting. If you've found this place, then the mountain has chosen to reveal what man tried to forget. Do not disturb what sleeps. The tunnels are alive, and they remember. The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakably Eustace's. After reading those words, the crew decided to leave the chamber untouched, sealing it back as they had found it. Yet none of them could shake the eerie sensation that something ancient had been awakened. Some say the earth itself feels different now around Turtle Island, quiet but watchful, as though Eustace's tunnels really do have a pulse of their own. In the weeks after the discovery of the Forbidden Room, the once quiet hills around Turtle Island Preserve became the center of attention. Historians, archaeologists, and even spiritual scholars gathered to study what Eustace Conway had built. Yet the more they uncovered, the clearer it became that his tunnels weren't about hiding. They were about meaning. Every passage, chamber, and carving seemed to form a story, as if Eustace had turned the mountain itself into a diary of his beliefs. The deeper they looked, the more patterns emerged. The layout of the tunnels wasn't random. It followed a deliberate sequence that reflected a cycle of life. The first chamber symbolized survival, filled with preserved food, tools, and supplies. The second represented knowledge, with shelves of books, jars, and notes about natural medicine and philosophy. The third, the Forbidden Room, was about memory, where man's spirit meets the earth's silence. Each level mirrored his teachings about harmony between people and nature. Eustace wasn't running from society. He was carving his life's message into the land itself. His journals, written in careful yet poetic language, hinted at the tunnels being his roots of freedom. He wrote, "When the world forgets the wild, I will build it beneath their feet." To him, going underground wasn't escape, it was connection. He believed that just as trees draw life from the soil, mankind must return to the earth to rediscover truth. Archaeologists noticed something else. Each tunnel aligned almost perfectly with natural features above ground. A spring, a ridge, a grove of oaks. When mapped from above, the layout formed what looked like a tree. The branches represented by the tunnels, the trunk by the main shaft leading to the surface. It was no accident. Eustace had designed his underground world as a living symbol, where every turn reflected nature's design. Even more puzzling was how the tunnels seemed to align with natural magnetic lines beneath the land, something only advanced geological instruments could detect. Yet Eustace had done it decades ago, guided purely by instinct. Locals who knew him said he often spoke about listening to the pull of the mountain. Maybe he wasn't being poetic. Maybe he truly could feel it. Scholars of Appalachian folklore later compared his construction to ancient earth sanctuaries, where spiritual seekers would descend underground to reconnect with the spirit world. The resemblance was uncanny. His tunnels were not just physical shelters, they were spiritual corridors. they told a story of transformation, of humanity's descent into darkness to rediscover light. Over time, Eustace's legend has shifted from that of a simple mountain man to that of a visionary who saw the earth as a living being. His tunnels weren't about survival. They were a sermon, written not in ink, but in clay and stone. Yet, one tunnel still defies explanation, the final one leading toward the river. Its design was too deliberate, its direction too perfect. Some say it leads to a natural energy, source hidden beneath the mountains. Others believe it leads to something Eustace found, something he never told anyone about. What's certain is that his tunnels changed how we see him forever. Eustace Conway wasn't just a man of the wilderness. He became part of it. His final message, etched beneath the Blue Ridge Mountains, still whispers today, "Freedom doesn't live above ground. It grows beneath it." When experts finally followed the coordinates written in Eustace Conway's final journal, they found themselves deep in the Appalachian wilderness, miles from Turtle Island Preserve. The path led them to a dense forest where the air felt untouched, the silence thick and heavy. After days of searching, they stumbled upon a small opening near a spring that fed directly into the Watauga River. The entrance looked natural, but closer inspection revealed the same handcrafted beamwork seen in Eustace's tunnels. This was it, the continuation of his underground network, the place his writings called the Path of Return. As they descended into the narrow shaft, they found signs that Eustace had been there. Old candles, leather gloves, and a makeshift stool carved from tree roots. The tunnel curved for several hundred feet before ending in a circular stone chamber. Unlike the earlier rooms, this one was different, simpler, cleaner, almost sacred. In the center lay a single wooden chest covered in dust. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was Eustace's final note. The handwriting trembled, but remained clear. "If you are here, then you have found the end of my road. I built this not to hide from the world, but to remind it what freedom feels like. When you dig deep enough, you stop running. You start remembering." Beneath the note were three small objects: a compass, a worn leather Bible, and a jar filled with soil. Each item symbolized a pillar of his life: direction, faith, and the earth itself. Eustace's tunnel didn't lead to treasure or escape. It led back to meaning. For decades, people saw him as a recluse or eccentric survivalist. But this final discovery revealed a deeper truth. He wasn't hiding from civilization. He was teaching it, in the only language he trusted: action. Every shovel of dirt he turned, every wall he built underground, was his silent protest against a world that forgot how to live freely. His tunnels formed a mirror of the mountain's roots, a reflection of his belief that freedom and self-reliance come from the ground up. Scientists who later mapped the full system found something incredible. The tunnels, when viewed from above, outlined the shape of a man's hand stretching outward from Turtle Island toward the river. Some say it was accidental. Others believe it was Eustace's way of showing the earth holding humanity in its grasp. In the years since the discovery, the site has been sealed to protect it, but those who entered say the air down there feels alive, warm, still, and oddly comforting, as if the mountain itself remembers him. Whether viewed as a spiritual sanctuary, a message to the future, or simply the final project of a man who lived by his own code, one truth stands firm. Eustace Conway didn't build those tunnels to be found. He built them to last, to remind the world that real freedom isn't granted by society or taken by law. It's carved patiently into the earth by those who dare to live by their own hands. And now, that legacy, buried deep beneath the soil of Turtle Island, continues to whisper his final words. The mountain never forgets those who become part of it.